Last year, I finally opened up in my content about my OCD, my obsessive compulsive disorder. I made this long form video where I did a reaction to OCD short film that won a bunch of awards, and it was really, really good. Like, if you haven't seen it, I will link the movie in the description of this video along with my reaction to the short film. If you don't understand OCD, I would go check it out. It is phenomenal work. That said, that was the first long form video that I had ever made on the subject, and it was scary. My OCD is really personal to me, but it's a wound that I experience that I am finally comfortable enough to talk about. And so, for this Men's Health Month, just like last year's Men's Health Month with my OCD short film reaction video, I want to make another video on OCD, this time just sharing my story. I just want to talk to you. I just want to open up to you about my experience with the most difficult mental health reality that I've ever had to deal with. I hope you'll stay to the end of this video and let me share my OCD story with you. Middle school is a really interesting time in a child's life. They're hitting puberty, they're going through all of these social developments, all of these physical developments that are occurring, a lot of mental stuff as well, right? And so there can be a lot of trouble navigating these various realities. And I was definitely experiencing all of that in addition to the fact that I was a Christian, and I was exploring being in a relationship. Now, all of these things might seem disconnected, but they're actually related because around this time, because of my body developing, my brain developing, and realizing that people were attractive and I wanted to be in a relationship with people, and so on and so forth, as well as some other factors that occurred around my sixth grade year of school. I began to say that I was struggling with lust. Of course, I was a Christian um, during this time, and so I would say that I was struggling with lust, and I would open up to my pastor and others that were close to me about it. And during middle school, I went on camps to overcome it, and I did all these sorts of things to deal with the fact that I was struggling with my sexual desire. Now, that's all I thought it was. Um, when I would recognize that I find someone physically or sexually attractive, or I would notice something about their clothing or whatnot, and I would monitor my thoughts in my head. And, intrusive thoughts would bother me that day, that whole school day. And I would get so nervous and anxious about being around women that I found attractive or just had intrusive thoughts about. I chalked all of this up to struggling with lust. When I was monitoring my thoughts, when I was judging myself for essentially being a normal developing teenage boy, I judged myself very heavily. And feelings of guilt and shame began to occur. I don't want to get like into the thought patterns or anything like that. But as you can tell, this is around the time that sexual OCD is starting to develop in me, and intense feelings of guilt and shame over what I'm experiencing, over what I'm thinking about people, and over actions that I'm starting to take either to cope with all of this guilt, shame, monitoring, intrusive thoughts, and the anxiety and depression that those things create, or because I am a developing teenage boy who is starting to experience horniness, right, and sex drives, and all of these sorts of things. I began, so regardless of why I was doing certain actions, I started participating in certain sinful actions. And this cycle, this constant guilt and shame, and performing sexual actions to try to overcome these things, unfortunately become just my reality. But I continue to say that I'm struggling with lust. I continue to say that this is just me not being able to handle my sexual desire. This is me not being able to handle a healthy part of myself. And so this cycle continues all through middle school, all through high school. You have these intrusive thoughts, you have these thoughts and feelings about people, and you judge yourself for them, you guilt and shame yourself for them, and then you engage in compulsionary actions, which you begin to feel like you need to do in order to survive, in order to stop the thoughts, to stop the feelings. You begin to engage in all sorts of, and so I began to engage in all sorts of sinful sexual behavior, stuff that I, to this day, replay in my head and regret, things that still give me guilt and shame to this day because um, they were really bad, from many different perspectives. And sometimes I hurt people. Sometimes but I was always hurting myself as well. And so this cycle, of course, like I said, continues through middle school, it continues through high school. And then I get to my first year of college. Again, all of this time, I'm saying I'm struggling with lust to the people that I care about the most. Now, getting to college, I was really excited. I was going to be a part of a Christian community in a way that I never had before. I had all these reasons to be concerned, but to also be excited. And so I had made a promise to myself. I was like, okay, I'm just not going to do these things anymore. I'm going to overcome all these things. I'm not going to do them anymore. And college, because unfortunately, my history in middle school and high school became checkered and horrible, and fair enough, and rightly so. And so I was like, college is going to be my rebirth. It's going to be my fresh start. It's going to be my rejuvenation. So a week goes by, and I spiral. I crash. I have an intense moment of depression, guilt, shame, anxiety, nervousness, and I have engaged in sexual compulsionary actions again. And that just further spirals me. And so my first year of college absolutely broke me. It absolutely broke me, because I had said that I wasn't going to continue the things that I said I was going to do. And for a week, I wasn't. I was better for a week. And then everything that I had built, it felt like in that week, even though it was a week and a short week, I was still building something. I was still having this level of consistency. And then I crashed and I spiraled. And I never really got out of that spiral, at least not throughout my first year of college. Thank God my counseling, or my college provides free counseling. So eventually, after talking to people, after opening up a bit, um, after some horrible mistakes, I go into counseling. And uh, the counseling is interesting because It's free, and so like as I'm struggling economically on top of all of this, I have a mental health resource that I don't need to pay for, which is like great. I love the counselor that I met with in the counseling sessions, in which I was able to finally express a lot of these things that I was hiding and suppressing because I felt like that's what I needed to do in order to survive, especially with what I was struggling with, right? Again, this entire time I'm saying I'm struggling with lust. And um, that's not I if you're a Christian or not, again, you don't have to be a Christian to watch my videos, but if you are a Christian, then you know that that's not the kind of thing you just want to uh, express in any context that you desire, right? And so a lot of this became suppressed, which didn't help because there would be actions and things would sort of explode because I was suppressing things so much because I didn't want anyone to know that I was going through this stuff. That also happened through middle school and high school, but it definitely broke me again my first year of college. And so I'm meeting with a counselor, um, and she never identified what I was going through. So I never got diagnosed with what I actually have. And but looking back, I think some of her advice was, um, I think some of her advice was probably based on an assumption that this might be what I have, that sexual OCD might be what I have. I'm not sure, but she did try to give me some advice, and I just couldn't take it because on top of guilt, shame, right, and all of this sort of stuff, the compulsionary actions are done to soothe all of that, to soothe all the depression and anxiety, but also to cover up fear. A fear that if you don't do this, something's going to happen. And as I talked about, and as the OCD short film showed, in my reaction to that short film, it feels like you're going to die if you don't have it. It feels like you're going through a war. Um, like there's that scene, of course, where he's army crawling across the ground as everything is going to hell in a handbasket, and um, all to sort of get to this thing that he feels he needs to do. And that is so real. It is so real. So fear held me back from stopping these actions. Um, Again, though, I don't get diagnosed. Finally, in the summer of 2023, uh, I'm not doing school counseling anymore. I have gone somewhere else and I have begun to get counseling. Not because the school counseling was bad or anything like that. It's just it was the summertime, and I wanted to continue counseling. So finally, I have these meetings with this counselor. I explain everything I'm going through, which, by the way, side tangent, really sucks. I've done this a couple of times, 4 times to be exact. But something that really, really sucks about going through counseling is switching counselors because now you feel the need to explain all of the things that you were going through and working through with a different counselor again with a new counselor. And that whole like process of rehashing everything just really, really sucks. It's so draining. With that being said, I go through that process with another counselor. And if I remember correctly, the counselor like had a whiteboard or something in the room that he drew on. And he said, okay, I'm going to describe your experience here. And so he drew this circle, he did all these different things and showed me like There's a name for this, and it's not struggling with lust. It's sexual OCD. And I was like, oh, oh wow. Like, that was a really big deal to me because this entire time I was working under a false assumption. Like, you gotta understand, from sixth grade to uh, uh, the um, past my freshman year of college, I was working under a false assumption. And it's like, oh my God, of course none of these other things worked. Like, of course prayer wasn't working. Of course going to church camp wasn't working. Of course talking to, I should say, getting spiritual guidance from people, as kind as they were and as helpful as they were trying to be, wasn't working because I wasn't just having a experience that's common to Christian men. I was having a mental health disaster. I was having a mental health disorder. And no one told me. No one noticed. No one said anything. And in a Christian context, especially in a conservative Christian context where there's already anti science, there's already trends of distrust of science, and this also doesn't just extend to evolution, but also psychology. Of course, they couldn't detect it. If for no other reason aside from the anti science, just that they're not trained to. Your Christian friend, your Christian male accountability partner, your pastor probably aren't trained in psychology to be able to identify these things. And so I was essentially, um, or I was suffering not just from what I was experiencing, but under a false notion, classification of what I was experiencing. And so, being diagnosed with OCD was literally revelatory. All of that said, I have mixed feelings about being diagnosed because the last thing I want to do is say I have a mental health disorder. Like, yeah, I got like my mental health struggles, maybe like, I have some struggles with my sexual desire, but like I'm not disordered. I'm not normal. And that was a big thing. It's something I'm working through now in counseling as well. It's not like everyone has what I have. I don't feel normal, and I want to be normal. I want to be okay. And so I buried this diagnosis, like pretended that I didn't have this, pretended that it didn't exist. This was to my extreme detriment. Part of the reason it was to my extreme detriment is because it doesn't matter whether or not I acknowledge the facts. The facts still present themselves. And while I'm trying not to collapse economically, with all of these disadvantages going on against me, while I'm trying to figure out my faith in a context where I can finally be in a community of faith and have these discussions, I'm also trying to navigate my emotional and mental health with um, without acknowledging the reality of it. And you can't do that. And so I brought this stuff into, I continue struggling with this stuff. and I brought it into my relationships, and I hurt people, and I continued to do the same things that I was doing before because I wasn't getting help or treatment for the things that I actually had. Whether that was because I buried the diagnosis, or because of economic struggles or time management. I mean, the stuff that I do, including the content and other things, like it's time consuming. And even just figuring out how to manage your time is another thing you have to do in order to survive and thrive in this chapter of my life. So, at the end of one of my relationships, I finally said, like, I can't do this anymore. I was completely broken. I was um, all of these different things. I was very hurt. I was very broken. Um, but like, it was my fault because the way that I acted in the relationship, the way I was in the relationship, it was very evident, looking back, that I the compulsions, the sense that I need this, the sense that if I don't get this, I won't survive, showed up in my relationships, and it destroyed it. And I did a whole lot of bad things, and unethical and immoral things. And so I finally had to like face it, like for real. So this is the summer of 2024 where I'm finally facing, slowly beginning to face what I'm dealing with. All throughout this time, I'm in and out of counseling and stuff for many different reasons, but and that'll be like a continuing trend of being in and out of counseling. But finally, I get through 2024. Um, we enter 2025, and I'm starting to heal a bit. Obviously, progress is slow, but progress is happening. Through counseling, through truly acknowledging what I'm going through, and being vulnerable with people about what I'm going through. And that was really helpful. It was a relief because you're already putting so much energy into trying to survive with a disorder. Putting additional energy in hiding it and suppressing everything involved in it is just hell. It's so much more work than what actually needs to be done, and it's not freedom. It creates so much inner dysregulation, um, inner conflict, that would just be better, easier if you could just get it out. Like, really. Um, and so, 2020, for a little bit, but primarily 2025 is where this started happening. And of course, the summer of 2025, June of 2025, um, is where I made my reaction video to the OCD short film that I've brought up a few times. And that was revolutionary for me. It isn't my most popular video, but that really doesn't matter because I did it for whoever the video would benefit, but primarily I did that video for me. I needed to be vulnerable. I needed to express this because I was going to continue dying a little bit every day if I continued suffering in silence. And so, yeah, and expressing it, talking about it, being vulnerable about it has made a lot of things clear. There's a lot about my past actions that make a lot more sense now that I understand that I have sexual OCD. There is a lot, like I thought for a long time, like my depression and anxiety, and struggle with lust were kind of distinct things. Like maybe they were related a little bit, but they were ultimately distinct things. But being diagnosed with sexual OCD makes me realize that it's actually my OCD that is causing all three things simultaneously. Um, like my and looking back, like so much of my depression just is my OCD manifesting, the guilt and the shame manifesting. So much of my social anxiety is the battling internally with intrusive thoughts, which, side tangent, also sucks because, like, at least if you're sick, if you've broken a bone, right, and you've done something like that, I've often thought about this in relation to work and job. Like, if you do some of those things, at least they can like see what's going on. They can verify with their eyes. You can get a doctor's excuse to miss school, to miss work, right? Because you're sick. Your body is broken. Like you can't come in here and do what you need to do with this going on. No one sees your internal dialogue. No one sees just how upsetting that intrusive thought you had was to you. No one sees how judgmental you are of yourself, um, because you had this thought that for anyone else would just pass on by their mind and they would move on from. You can't move on from it because it has to mean something, right? You have to dissect it, you have to pick it apart, you have to analyze, you have to monitor, you have to control yourself. Every single thought is a piece of data that matters. And so no thought can go without examination. And it's so freaking exhausting. But people don't see any of that. People don't see the battle, the hell that you're going through in your mind. And so when you're having a bad day mentally, at least for me personally, um, having a day to myself to self care, calling off of work, not going to classes, not going to school, like whatever the case may be, not showing up for an event, can make me feel guilty because it's like, how do I explain to these people that something is broke, something is sick, and I have a valid reason to not be here, but you just can't see it? And it's, I just have this like fear and anxiety that it's gonna look like lying to people. That hasn't always stopped me from being honest, and I try my best to be honest because I do think honesty, is an ethical virtue, for secular and Christian reasons or practical reasons, right? So, um, I try, but even there's shame and guilt, and the intrusive. You can see how the intrusive thoughts and the thought patterns develop out of calling off. Um, and so it's it's a huge problem. All of that being said, though, um, I think 2025, looking back, like there were a lot of negatives. There were a lot of weird stuff that happened. And in 2026, there's been bad things that have happened too in relation to my OCD and my actions and so on. But I have noticed that I get better, and I have noticed that things are progressing. Like, I could not have made this video that I'm making now a year ago. Impossible. it was hard enough. You can see me crying. Of course, in that OCD reactions video, and even in this video, I'm holding back tears. Um, it was hard enough to make that video. It was hard enough to make the short form series where I talked about my experience with OCD. Never could I tell anyone that I have sexual OCD. Like, God forbid, because at least with other forms of OCD, there isn't a taboo around it, especially in a conservative Christian space. But there was absolutely a taboo, a weirdness, a different atmosphere around these topics. In my opinion, maybe that's self-imposed, maybe it's not, but it feels true. Um, and I've operated under that assumption for a very long time. And I feel like I've experienced it as well. And so I will say, quick side tangent, that like I feel like being a woman and having this would probably be worse. I don't know, of course, but given the way that like conservative Christian spaces sometimes treat the sexuality of men versus the sexuality of women, I definitely think that there would be some additional social considerations on top of the sexual OCD that I, as a man, don't necessarily have to deal with, although there are other gender things that I might occasionally need to navigate. All that said, we get to 2026 and we get to right now. And there are challenges that have arisen, new challenges or new-ish challenges that I'm navigating. There are things that I don't struggle with anymore, don't do anymore. So it's been a very long journey of ups and downs. Um, and unfortunately, like, I've hurt myself and I've hurt others along the way. And I really wish I hadn't. And I wish that I would have had this diagnosis. I wish someone would have noticed so much sooner. So much sooner. Because I think it would have saved me and others who were affected by me a lot. Um, but, of course, none of that is to dissuade responsibility because I'm still responsible for my OCD journey. I'm still responsible for handling my disorder. Um, I have some additional challenges. I'm going to fail, and I have to acknowledge that, and I have to try, try to give myself grace and mercy and not question every motive and question every thought and blah, blah, blah. But I'm still responsible for all my actions, right? And so um, that also has been a really important like realization on top of all of this that um, as hard as this is and so on and so forth, there are things that can be done to get help, and there's still a responsibility to get help and to accept that help and to grow in light of that help. And ultimately, that's the message that I want to give to you. Of course, it's Men's Health Month, and we all know the stigma right around men not being able to be emotional, as what it means to be a man, or not cry, or not get help, blah blah blah. I've talked about this in videos and shown the academic literature on this as well. And this occurs for both white men and black men. This occurs in various minority groups. This sort of masculine gender notion, and it's really problematic, and it sucks, and it's dumb, and I hate it, and it needs to stop. You need to get help for the mental issues that you have. people do care, there is a right treatment. There is something that can be done. Um, there is at least a little bit of help, at least, that you can get. Obviously, I don't want to ignore anyone's socioeconomic position. So many people are in a position of like, uh, I can't because doing a job is taking up so much time because I need to put so much time in it in order to survive economically that I do not have time to go through counseling and work through all my emotional baggage. I've seen this happen in real time. I've known this to occur with people that I know and love. You know, there's a lot of reasons why people can't get counseling or therapy. Um, So even if whether it's reaching out and trying to get counseling and therapy, whether it works or not, just trying, or whether it's reaching out to friends, family, loved ones, and just being like, hey, like I need to talk, I need to work through this, um, and this is like what I'm actually going through when when people aren't around, when it's the middle of the night and my thoughts get dangerous. So that's my main encouragement to you. Please seek the help that you need. No one was meant to deal with their problems alone. And you don't have to. You don't have to suppress things. You don't have to deal with it alone. You, the individual, are not meant to exist solely individually and manage all your things individually. We were supposed to be among community. We were supposed to have partnership. We were supposed to have communion with others. So that's the main message I want to get across, of course. Go seek the help that you need. That said, thank you so much for watching this video and sticking to the end of it. If you have, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Was this helpful for you? Did this describe your experience in some way? What is your experience with OCD and sexual OCD? If you have it, feel free to let me know down in the comments. I can also make some short form content on a couple of things that I still didn't touch on this particular video, but maybe I could go more into them later. So if you want some of that as well, again, let me know in the comments. And make sure you subscribe for more psychology, mental health content, etc., etc. Thank you so much, and God bless.